Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm joined by a very special guest, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Clark Sell. How are you today, Clark?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to have you on the show. I think, 3 or 4 guests. I'd have to go back through the catalog where we've specifically talked about you
Oh,
and
really?
in like the best sense of the word.
Oh,
Like we've
I'm
talked about
totally
you.
piqued.
And because a lot of guests, I've my first time meeting them was at that conference in
Okay.
Texas.
Okay.
And we had known each other on the internet, but that was the first place we were all able to gel. And I I'm going to say this as a conference organizer. I'm going to say this as a conference speaker for 15 some years. I'm going to say this as a conference attendee. That conference Texas was one of my like top 5 conference
Oh,
experiences.
wow.
And and I'm not trying to say that to like blow smoke up your ass or anything.
Sure.
I'm saying it was a good vibe. I felt like everyone was super approachable, and I made a lot of friends just during that event. And so anyone out there listening who's never been to that conference, it was my first that conference, which is amazing in the 10 plus years you've been doing it. But it was something special, and I think that you you and your team definitely don't get the credit you deserve for it. Like you should have all the accolades and you should be selling out the day of. But I'm glad to have you on the show because I think we're going to talk a lot about the business of conferences and kind of settle some of the misunderstandings that people have about what goes into one of these events. And I can relate immensely to all of it. And uh, so, Clark, with that, let's I want to ask you to introduce yourself, and I don't want you to talk about that conference. We know you run that conference, but tell us about what else you do other than that conference.
Sure.
How's that sound?
Yeah. And thank you for the accolades. It's, you went to the what I call our baby conference. So Texas is new, so it's only been around a couple of years. And
Yeah,
with going to another venue or another location, or I'll say anytime there's, plus one in the array, right? You get another problem with it. So um yeah, my name's Clark Sell, husband, father, live outside of Chicago, or more appropriately, halfway between Milwaukee and in Chicago in the middle of, nowhere. I run 2 companies, that conference, which you already mentioned, and another company called Unspecified. I've been in the tech industry for 25 years, um, primarily in the web space, did a little mobile stint, been across fintech and healthcare and a few other industries. Started at Allstate Insurance, went to Microsoft, then Telerik, then spun off, and been on our own now for the past, I guess, 7 or 8 years. So, throw a global pandemic in there. Um, Love soccer, love the wrench on cars, overcommit, all the signs of, a good human, I guess.
well, let's just kind of dive into the business of conferences. So you've been doing that conference for
Since
was
2010.
this 10 years? 2010.
Uh,
Okay, so
So our
14 years.
Yeah, so the company started in 2010. We had kind of a 2-year ramp up to our first event. The first event was in 2012. This will mark our 13th, I think, event in Wisconsin. We just did our third event in Texas. That's if I got the numbers right. Maybe it's 13 or 14. I don't remember. It's so many. Um, and then we've done a bunch of stuff online and built our own platform and whatnot. But um, yeah, 14 years the company's existed.
Where did the initial spark for that conference come from?
You know, I was, um, I was sort of pissed off, if you will, that there was nothing really happening in the upper Midwest across technology stacks. So If you think about up here, we've got Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, the Twin Cities, Cedar Rapids. Um, there's this plethora of ginormous metropolitan areas, and of every one of those metros, you have kind of the in the city, out of the city. So if there's something going on in the city, people from the suburbs don't necessarily want to go, and if there's something going on in the suburbs, people from in the city don't want to go. And I was like, and then you just kind of compound that by, oh, let's take our Mongo folks and our Java folks and our .NET folks and our Ruby folks. And it's like, why are we not all like playing along? And that just kind of irked me. And um, so I wanted a conference that was, um, actually, let me rephrase. I wanted a gathering of people that was um, large enough that you had this diversity across kind of all the tech stacks you could have in a place that was fun where you wouldn't go back to work, and like real things were happening, like products were being launched, and all of the fun. But also, could it be in a place where it's family friendly? Like, I know you, we've worked on this project, we've been grinding away for 100 hours a week. Wouldn't it be nice that I got to meet your spouse or your kids? Could we, um, back then and still now, there was a lot of talk about, well, we need more women in tech. And so the answer was always like, oh, let's go like grab the nurse off the street and just pull them into tech and it'll be fine. And it's like, oh, that doesn't really fix the problem. Like, we need to create exposure to kids when they're young so that they know that that's an option. It would be great if we could have their parents or them see their parents as heroes, because we kind of make nothing, right? We make ones and zeros. So could we just kind of create a place where that all kind of came together? And we live next to a town called the Wisconsin Dells, which is this water park capital of the world, which makes no sense whatsoever. But there's a giant convention center space. It's also non-union. It's kind of centrally between all the big metros. So family owned business, it was kind of a nice partnership of like, how do we do this? And so we ended up creating what we now know today is that conference. And ironically, the name was meant to just be this abstract thing that nobody really related to. It gave us this ability to not be identified as something, and yet just it totally went the other way for the good. So, um, but yeah, I was just kind of mad. I was just kind of mad that we didn't have a place, and I wanted to create that place and try to foster a larger community around.
Well, let's kind of dive into that first event. What did the budget look like? Did you have any experience running events prior to that conference?
Yeah, I ran some code camps before, and I ran some code camps, ran some smaller conferences here and in Texas, actually. And they were kind of I'll say 10 to maybe 30, $40,000 events. Um, I, at the time, I was very active in the local communities, kind of through the central region, if you will. Spoke a lot nationally. And, I thought getting people to a conference would be an easy thing. I don't want to say that we really had a budget, um, but we walked into that first year, and I think the cost was like 100 grand maybe. And we walked in, maybe it was 110, and we walked in $20,000 upside down. Um,
Hmm.
and that's a pretty common story for most folks. But, here's our first thing. We got 450 people going to it. As the, as the event is progressing right through the days, like we're watching the budget go to shit. It's, oh shit, we didn't have enough in plate counts or this or that. And that's kind of where the 20,000 came in. So we kind of walked in almost, almost even. Um, Thankfully, due to a series of complications to that first event that were not our problem, we got some money credited back and we were able to
Hmm.
continue on to the next year. Um, but yeah, we'll call it 100 grand of holy shit. I don't I don't know how this is going to happen, to the point of like, we didn't have all the cash in hand. And for anybody who knows, when you have an event, you pay up front. So I had to go get
I
a credit card. So I was like, fuck it.
Yeah.
Will you take a credit card? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, great. Call up Amex. And I was like, cool. Can I get an Amex? And they were like, yeah, sure. How much you want to charge on? I was like, 100 grand. And they were like, what? No. And, and so we had to do this dance of like, well, how much can I? And they were like, well, you don't have a limit per se, but you have a limit. So we had to like wire them money so that we could do it. And we had to float a balance, and like that like 45 days on there was like a disaster. But since then, to this day, we still pay for the conference on an Amex card, the entire thing.
Well, I've dealt with enough venues myself, so I think it's kind of interesting for people out there. Let's start with the conversation with the Kalahari. So you go into the Kalahari, you say, "I want to do an event." What does the back and forth look like for how many rooms you're going to
Yeah.
need? Um, like I'm sure the
Yeah. What's that
Kalahari has,
negotiation look like?
yeah, has a list of expenses they want you to pay for. What do you choose to pay for, and what do you choose to do without?
Yeah. I mean, that process has changed over the years. Typically, any kind of venue contract is a multi-year deal. Now, there's kind of pre-pandemic, post-pandemic how things work, but usually those contracts are like 5 to 10 years. Most people, they're not really interested when you're talking about trying to reserve hundreds of thousands of square feet. They're looking for
Yeah.
5, 10 year commitments on things. Um, you obviously have to build some rapport with them over time. Our very first couple of years, we had a 1 year, and then we had a 2 year, and then it was a 3 year, and then it was another 2 year. I mean, we've been that part hasn't been as much of a thing for us. But all contracts essentially are you filling the rooms, right? What's your kind
Mhm.
of room, and then what's your attrition on those rooms? How much food are you going to buy that helps offset the convention center costs? And then you can get into bigger line items like the AV, or if you want to call it hardware, like stages and tables and chairs, and then it kind of goes down from there. So we,
And when you say rooms, you mean hotel rooms?
I mean, hotel rooms. Yeah.
Hotel
So
rooms.
if you split a physical space in two sides, you're responsible for booking X number of nights of hotel rooms. And then you're responsible for some payment, for some cost of the convention center, which may or may not be offset by the hotel rooms you booked or the food you paid. That kind of depends on the contract. It's usually both of those
Yeah.
things. And the minute you sign, like, you're on the hook for, I'm just going to use round numbers. Let's say the contract is like, it's going to be $100,000, or that's the projected cost. And so I sign on the line the next day. I'm responsible for some percentage of that contract, say $30,000. And as we get closer to the event, like, that number goes up. So if I decide, I don't really want to do it, but it's like 2 weeks out, I still owe $100,000. Like, I don't get to like get out of that.
Yeah.
And that happens. So you may say, well, then if it's a multi-year contract, well, the same kind of thing happens. It just kind of reduces over the number of years. And then the time you have to say, I don't want to do it. And that time you say, I don't want to do it, maybe like, I don't know, 24 months, 12 months, from kind of termination and whatnot. So they're no joke. I mean, they're a commitment, and they're, they're scary because you have to put up all the capital up front, and,
Yeah.
um, you know,
And that's going to vary for anyone out there that's listening that's thinking about putting on a conference. That varies a lot based off the venue. We've done it at venues where we we had food and beverage minimums. That was we get our rooms for free. I'm sorry, we get our venue space for free if we met a food and beverage minimum. And then we had a number of hotel rooms we were supposed to be responsible
yep.
for. And it's, yeah, you play this game of, all right, how successful do I think this event's going to be?
Oh, yeah.
And um,
And not just
so
this
you have
year,
these,
but your following years, right? Like if you
yeah.
sign a multi-year contract, you're betting on yourself 2, 3, 4 years out, and you don't know. There might be a global goddamn pandemic come in and slap you around.
How do you translate the things you have to spend money on into I let's talk about the income aspect of it now. So you need to sell tickets and you need to sell tickets at a price to help pay for the conference, and you also need to sell sponsorship,
Yep.
and you need to offer stuff to the sponsors to get them to come in. Can we talk about some of the thought process of how you price your tickets and how you price your sponsorship packages?
Sponsorships, we try to, they're the easiest because the value returned is kind of the easiest, meaning we're giving them the ability for brand awareness. We're giving them the ability to exchange contact information or lead generation stuff. Mind you, I'm going to preface all this. We do not sell any data. We do not give away anything.
Yeah.
That entire exchange has to happen with the two parties that are at one of our venues. And I say that because there's a lot of conferences, most like commercial conferences, just give away the email list. That's part of the deal. So we get in a lot of shit for that. Um, so, but sponsorships, right? It's either brand recognition, product sales, service sales, um, something along those lines, lead exchange. So that's a pretty like known quantity. We're giving them physical space to be involved. The more they spend, the more we kind of do. And I just spend a lot of time trying to be competitively priced, but also we try to take on a less number of sponsors at a higher rate so that we can service better. So, some will say, well, your sponsorship is higher than X, Y, and Z. And it's like, sure, but we're only going to have 30 sponsors. So like, your opportunity to network is greater because there's less of this. And, you can get into kind of the whole sales thing, um, but yeah, so we sell sponsorships, obviously for Texas and Wisconsin. Um, and that's a constant, like, it feels like seed rounds of funding. Like you're constantly just begging for money. Um, but that's the game. Tickets are another source of revenue. Our tickets don't really pay for themselves until you hit a certain number, which is multiple hundreds.
Hmm.
So if you think of a ticket, you really have kind of fixed costs. Like let's take a t-shirt. A t-shirt is, we'll say it's $10, right? It's never going to be anything more or less than $10. So if a ticket is $100, you got $10 in ticket costs, you got $90 left to play with. Um, then there's some variable costs. I call these variable fixed costs, things like food. So it's fixed per person, but it's variable depending upon how we decide what to choose, right? We could serve you a banana or we can serve you a steak dinner. That kind of fluctuates depending upon how many tickets there are and where we'll fall in at the end of that cycle. And then there's fixed costs that are kind of amortized across all tickets. So let's say the production crew is 25,000, you know, the more tickets you have, the cheaper that is per person. Um,
Hmm.
and then, other things that are all variable that just kind of depend on how the company runs, right? Marketing expenses and giveaways and whatnot. Now, we've always everything that you see at that conference is something that we built or bought. So like the stage is ours, the signs we built, like all of that we don't rent. Um, you know, typically people will go and rent TVs from a venue or a production house. I just go buy them and they'll pay for themselves in one or two events. And then we'll have them for
Yeah.
two, three, four more. Maybe one gets busted in shipping or we replace it. But like the cost of those things have gone down so cheap. What am I on the hook for? Moving, storing. So we have a couple shipping containers that we use as a warehouse. Um, so those are our two main sources of income. When the pandemic came, we added a membership feature where they could sponsor us and get some discounts back. And that, sponsorships and memberships, they really kind of go into running the company, like all the things that people don't expect to happen as part of a company that has to run this thing, servers and,
Yep.
you know, bandwidth and whatever else comes with that. Um, but it's still, something like Wisconsin, I don't know, break even's probably 700 tickets before we even get into what can we do. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, the more you get that you can depend on, the better you can potentially offer prices or do other things. But inflation has hit us so hard in the last 4 years that some things that used to be, I mean, some of our costs have almost doubled. So, and we're struggling with keeping kind of sponsorships the same, ticket sales the same.
Yeah.
What do you do if you give a discount, right? What does that mean? So it's a really hard, it's a hard aspect in that we're not a code camp and we're not a kind of for-profit mega entity like a Microsoft build. So when you're in that
Hmm.
middle, it's somewhat of a, I don't want to say touchy, but you know, people may or may not be paying out of their pocket. Their company may be paying. Who knows? Who knows really how price sensitive they are?
You were touching on, well, if we just took food costs into account,
Yeah.
and I know this because I've done it, but if you're saying the range could be from a sandwich bar is kind of like sandwich. If you're at an event and you have sandwich or pasta, build your own sandwich or build your own pasta thing. That's literally the cheapest thing on the menu, and when we say cheapest thing, it's probably $25 to $35 a head
Yep.
or
Oh
a
yeah.
plate, depending on how
Yeah.
they're. And if you're anywhere that has protein on the menu,
Yep.
like you're easily up in the $50 to $75 a
Yep.
head range
Yep.
just for that one meal.
Yep.
And it's not even, it's good food. Like it's
Right. It's not. It's
depending
not.
on the venue,
The
but
sandwich isn't
it's
worth
not
$25.
$75 a
Right.
head.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
And
I get really. I don't want to say sensitive about that. In
mhm,
that it is overpriced, but there's also another factor that often gets overlooked, which is, there is a whole staff that's behind the scenes that are making these sandwiches and doing them into dishes. And, so
yeah,
for a given event of ours, we may have 30, 50 people in the back of house that are doing shit that, you know, nobody ever sees. And so there is some of that kind of overhead or tax, if you will, is on top of that. But yeah, food's expensive. Like food is astronomically expensive. And could we go somewhere else and get it cheaper? Sure. But then we wouldn't be at a water park with a
yeah.
resort, right? Like now you're saying it's a different thing and a different experience. And that's an option. It's not one we've exercised at the moment.
Part of the vibe is being at the Kalahari, being in
Yep.
the enclosure of the Kalahari, and you don't get that at the Holiday Inn Express down the street.
Right. Right.
It's yeah, if you sell out the Holiday Inn, it's a different type of event
That's right.
than it is at that conference. But you pay the tax for that
That's
by
right.
being at the Kalahari.
That's right. And there's a certain like headroom of things, right? If I need to put 1,000 people in a room all at once, and that's kind of like our like litmus test of a venue. Like, where can I put, or I should say, when we shop for a venue, where can I put 1,000 to 3,000 people all in one space? That gets limited very fast because you're talking, uh, what is 1836? I think, I think we do about 1,200 in about 36,000 square feet.
Mhm.
Um, never mind breakout rooms and all that other kind of stuff. So like you have configurations of, 8 at a table, 6 at a table, 8-foot table, 6-foot table, herringbone style, classroom style, blah, blah. Like it just goes on and on. But Yeah. When you want to stuff 1,000 people somewhere, things get limited real quick.
Now, a couple of years ago, moved, you did a second event out in Texas. So
Yep.
the one I've been to. What what led you to do a Texas event? Because you're nowhere near Texas,
No.
and as far as I know, you don't have any ties to Texas. So what led you to doing the Texas event?
Well, I do have some ties to Texas.
Okay,
We've had some family that has lived or been rooted in Dallas. Um, some of the other events we did were actually in Austin back in the day. Um, I've always enjoyed Texas and the Texas things that are down there. But really, you know, it was about 2017. The Kalahari let us in on a little secret that they were building another venue, and that other venue was going to be outside of Austin. And the tech scene in Austin, which I had been very active in at that time, was growing and doing cool things. And I was like, well, it'd be kind of cool if we could do a plus one. And part of the plus one is me wanting to have more impact all year round, but me also trying to be, um, I'm going to go more better. We've reached a point where we own a lot of the infrastructure. We built a platform. We've hit a place to where, like, the marketing system is expensive. And so if I have another event, my costs actually reduce themselves and I should be able to service better because I'd have a little bit more revenue. And so if I could get a little more revenue, then I could have some staff and maybe we could perform better with having two than we could with
hmm
one. And so that's the path we went down. The problem was global pandemic. That hit right in the middle of us planning for our first event. And it really reset us as a company. Like we had already staffed up to, start doing two. And there's a whole lot of learnings of like, how do you market two different events and the words that you use and the timing and tickets and blah, blah, blah. Um, Different tax codes and all kinds of shit. Um, and, the first 3 years at Texas have been from from a company standpoint, it's been really difficult. Um, from an event standpoint, I mean, they've been great events, as you know. But
yeah.
there's a lot behind the scenes that people don't see and contracts and timing and whatnot. So really the goal is to have more impact, hopefully have a little more revenue to just do it better, alleviate a little bit of the pressures on us trying to run this size of event because my wife and I run the company. Um, And right now it's just the two of us running it. So, I mean, it's a large event for two people to put on.
Well, so you said along with the conferences, you have that um, platform,
Yep.
and I could you talk a little bit more about what the platform is and the purpose the platform serves?
Yeah. I, I mean, we're engineers. Um,
Yeah.
so rather than using Tito and, which we used to use back in the day, but, um, I am big on kind of the experience. And granted, our website has plenty of places where it's god awful ugly, but, um, we're able to do what we do in part because we've really customized the experience to how we run and operate. So I think it gives us a little bit of a unique advantage. Like if I need to do better SEO, like we control the pages that are there for each of the different sessions. We have an API so that I can go through and grab your images and create speaker cards and do this. The registration is all hooked into your profile, right? Like all of that's there. So hopefully from the time that like you buy a ticket or you submit a session, like we've curated this experience to where you're not kind of guessing, you're not going over here to do this or over there to do that. And that's resulted in a front end that's CDN cached and all this stuff. And it's all open source. And, we kind of work on it as much as we can. But um, we we want to create a place where we can foster the community outside of just like, here's a schedule, show up. Great.
Yeah.
Like, we want to be more than that, right? Who is Kevin? Who is this company? Who are the people for this company? How do you do lead generation? Like all of that kind of integrated into a place that everyone can control their aspect and you feel good about using and enjoy. Um, is it overkill? I mean, I guess, for some, they could go,
I
look, I could just go to Sessionize and give everybody an Excel doc. But for me, I'm like, if I really want to grow the community and interact all year, then our job, really my passion is like, how do I connect people? How do we grow their network? So you'll see hintlings of this, like you saw some at Texas, and how you can connect kind of across to the side. Um, so, you know, future state, we've got a platform that we can really do online stuff. We can really do open spaces online. And, um, it kind of means something to be in the ecosystem, if you will.
I can appreciate that because with a lot of events, there's a couple little humps in energy, right? There's the initial, all right, call for speakers is open, so everyone's excited, the event's happening. Then when that closes, it dies down, and then tickets go on sale, and there's this gradual ramp of people are getting excited about the event. They're joining the Slack or the Discord for the event and planning travel. They're doing all the things because the
Yep.
event's gonna happen.
Yep.
And the event happens, and there's this peak of everyone's engaged, everyone's excited. They're going to the sessions, they're partying afterwards, they're doing things that we shouldn't talk about after at the bar. And then the event ends,
Yep.
everyone goes home,
Yep.
and no one talks about the event anymore. And what happens is we say, man, you remember that event we were at?
Yep.
That was a good of event.
Yep.
But that's about it. The conversations don't really continue afterwards because
Yep.
we're all exhausted.
Yep.
And I can appreciate that.
It's exactly what we're trying to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Pick that up, keep those conversations going, at least keeping everyone engaged enough
Yep.
where they feel like they're part of this bigger community.
That's the goal. I mean, it's much larger than, if the goal is to be a facility to network people and create exposure, a conference is just one instantiation of like, how do we do that? That's a very in-person, high, like velocity conversation, high fidelity, if you will. And the platform for us is a mechanism of which to try to help connect people and for us to build on. And because we own it, we can do other things easily. Like I said, registration, ticket sales, right? It just makes it easier for us to plan. Now, again, we've built it, so it's got a lot of our own shit in there. That's a problem, but that's
Yeah.
Build versus buy conversation.
So along the beginning of that conference, you were working for, you said you were working for Microsoft, went to
Yep.
work for Telric.
Yep.
And along the way, you went off on your own. Um, talk a little bit just about the consulting that you do on the side.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was about 7 years ago we started Unspecified. Um, my my enterprise life was very much product development, product management, architecture, building softwares for some of the biggest companies, always in the web space. And so there was a bit of necessity when we started Unspecified. TC was ramping up; it was costing more and more. That was a side deal, but we need to feed kids and do all that kind of stuff. So,
Details.
yeah, details. And so, I started a company called Unspecified. We started doing freelancing. And really, like, I looked at that, it was an ability for me to take all that big, like, enterprise experience and try to bring it to, I'll call it the small media market. Because I was working for giant conglomerates. And, TC, for the most part, I'd always get a contract out of just being involved in the community and the people that were there. And so maybe I was an architect on a project. Maybe I was just hired guns, slinging some code, but it's kind of doing that in a day and doing TC at night. And, with any company, I think you go through these ebbs and flows of like, shit, I got to do business development and I got contracting, lawyering, and all this other stuff that goes, do I really want to be a consultant? Um, and we had started staffing up before the pandemic on that project, on that company. And we're kind of growing that with really wanting to do more product work, more of our own product work. But the pandemic came, and then I needed to really spend a bunch of time on TC, do the contracts, and just that's where I needed to be at that time. And so that business kind of slowed down a bit. And now we're kind of in a place where it's picking back up, and I've got a few client projects now. Um, and it's web development work, and I'll say the open source land.
It seems like it's a means to justify the work you're doing on TC. And
It's,
it if
it,
money were no object, you would just be all TC all the time.
yeah, I
That's
mean,
what it sounds like.
yeah, that would be great. Um, I
But of
think,
course, there's more than
yeah, I
money
mean,
as an object. Yeah.
well, money is a thing that gives resources to do stuff, right? I think often we, especially in tech, people get wigged out like, oh my God, I got to pay for this product. There should be a free tier. It's like, yeah, but that's like your brother or sister over there, like writing that stuff so that you can do your job. So spend $120 a year so that they have some income and can do that. Like, I'm sure you got $120 worth of value out of that tool, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, I, I, as anybody who's run a business for some time, you, you learn a little bit about your business and yourself and what is it that you want to do. And sometimes things change, and maybe what was fun once before isn't as fun now. Um, I don't like event planning by any stretch. Like, I don't like it. That's a big chunk of my time for TC is like, are all the things going to get slung at the same time? So what do you do then? Right. Do you hire help to take care of some of that work? Can you afford to hire help? So right now, there's a bit of monies. We're still trying to kind of get our feet under us from the pandemic. So there's means to an end, sure. Means to figure out what it is that we really want to do. Like, I've got a stack of products that I would love to build. Um, but that's a huge investment of time and capital. And
Yeah.
right now what I need is capital.
What's been the hardest part about coming back from the pandemic?
I don't know. I don't know if we did it, if we did the pandemic wrong. I don't know. We made a huge investment in like rebuild our platform and everything during that time. I think for me, we were on such a great trajectory, and you kind of grow up with your thing, if you will. So today it's 100 people, tomorrow it's 200 people. And with that, all of your things around you grow up as well. So you go from, a 100-person contract to a 200-person contract.
Yeah.
When the pandemic came, we went from, an 1,800-person conference to a 0-person conference. And everything that we knew before really was reset. People's behaviors changed. How you market has changed. People aren't in the office. So how do you reach them? Like, what magic channel, what magic water cooler are there? User groups, they've died, right? There's just
Yeah.
been a lot of like resetting expectations and um, thoughts and value. Like, where do you exist in that ecosystem? And it's been hard. The flip side of that is you could also say, you know, if you were complacent in some areas, that would really come through, right? And it's a good opportunity to go, hey, we didn't really do sales well. So how do I do sales? Or, hey, there's AI now. So can I leverage that to do something else better? It's just, I feel better about things when we start getting back to something that's more I don't wanna say financially sustainable, but we've invested so much to keep the lights on, um, that, you hope that that investment will, I don't wanna say make a return, but at least be paid back and made whole, that the thing will
Yeah.
continue to live on another day. And every business owner has to sit there and go, I don't know, like, is this the end? Or is this just, is the next step the beginning, the new beginning? And that's all gut feels.
What do you feel your end game is? Where do you feel you're being led to right now? Um, is it just keeping that conference going as long as everyone will let it go? Is there something else you'd like to go off and try?
Um, I'd say for unspecified, the next place is me building a product. Um, I'd say for TC, it's, I don't want to say us being more involved in the community, but I'd like to see us use um, the weight that we have to rebuild user groups, rebuild or help other conferences. Um, I'd like to see us really kind of reformat what the conference looks like.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think you'll see big changes. Um, big changes like we may not do sponsors anymore. Like, what does a conference look like if the ticket price was higher and there was no sponsors? What if it was more of a membership model instead of a ticket model? I don't know. Like,
I'm no I don't know any other
I,
way.
yeah, like I
Yeah.
don't, I legitimately don't know. But what I can say is, I feel like not going and exploring different avenues of that um, would be foolish. And we just sit in a really weird spot right now where, like our newsletter list is dropped off dramatically because of layoffs.
Yeah.
So, you don't really see it until those hard bounces come in. You're like, oh, wow, like another 100 people got fired today. Like you can visually see it. So, I think we do. I think we know how to run an event well. Great. I think we can always have more impact.
Yeah.
Great. What does that really mean? How can we do it? How can we really? Um, I think I'll feel good about it when people go, if I wasn't involved in that in some capacity, like my life changed because I was involved in that, right? That's our litmus test of success. Um, and if we can quantify that, that's great. Um, and we'll just kind of see. I mean, obviously we have to pay the bills in the meantime, right? That's this balance. And um, we're in the middle of contract negotiations for Texas and trying to figure out what that really means. I don't know. Nothing's
Any
ever a guarantee.
any chance of that conference moving to any other cities other than Wisconsin Dells and Texas?
Well, we got to get back to Texas. I don't have anything on the books yet. Is there a chance? Potentially. Um, what I'll say is it going to Texas was way harder than I thought it would be. Way
Okay.
harder. Um, Different state taxes, different different laws, learning how to ship and semi trucks and some logistical kind of things. Um, Learning how to market, just like how do you talk about two events that may be overlapping in like their marketing plans?
Mhm.
Um, there are a lot of things that we really like about Texas, like the venue's easy to get to, and airfare, so that attracts a more international audience. Like there's just the weather's more predictable. Granted, we do Wisconsin in the summer, so that's still predictable. Um, but I'm not opposed to it. right now I could tell you for 2 people, there's no way we could handle a third, could barely handle 2.
Yeah.
So, um, we'll see. I mean, we'll see when we'll know it's right when it's right. How about that?
I live in Virginia, and they're building a new Kalahari here in
Yes, they are.
Fredericksburg, Virginia, and more than one person from other Kalahari-based conferences have said, "Kevin, you should run the Kalahari conference in Virginia." And I go, "No."
Yeah. I mean, it was on our radar. That was gonna be our third. But Texas has not hit the numbers that we thought it was going to hit in the path that it has. Maybe we were a little too
Mhm.
soon out of the pandemic. Um, if Texas was hitting the numbers it needed to hit, then Virginia probably would have been closer. But as it stands right now, it's not on the radar.
Let's end this conversation kinda on uh, let's say, an uplifting note.
Yeah.
And for anyone out there listening, when you see these community conferences, and I'm talking community conferences, and I'll just list randomly a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So there's that conference,
Yep.
Wisconsin Dells in Texas. We have uh, Code Mash in Ohio. We have KCDC, Kansas City
Yep.
Developer Conferences. Um, there's still the random code camps that happen
Yep.
off and on. You have a plethora more community
Yeah,
events.
totally.
And we we don't include the builds, the VS Lives. Now I'm
Yep.
.NET, so yeah,
Yep.
they stand out. But you have like Google Clouds, you have the Amazon,
Reinvent.
what's the big
Reinvent.
reInvent. Those don't count. We talk strictly about the community events. These are run by essentially volunteers. Clark, we talk a lot about big money numbers, but none of that's really going in your pocket. Uh, it's not going in my pocket for the events that I run. Um, there's big expenses, and they're all fairly justified. And I hope we covered that the price that you pay to get in the door is actually a fraction of the cost that you probably should be paying to
Yeah.
be at the event.
You should ask yourself a different question, which is, why is it that I'm spending $4,000 to go to Microsoft Build and getting less than I would get out of that conference or Code Mash or KCDC
Yep.
at a third of the price, right? Like there's for me, and they're good events. They're highly produced. Like I'm not speaking ill about them, but I do want people to ask themselves, like, are you all right being the product? And I think that's the segmentation for me from like a community conference to I don't know if I'm going to I'll call it for a for-profit conference.
Mhm.
Like you're going into a system that they are going to sell to you because they want you to continue to buy their thing and this and that. Whereas I want to make you a better human and could care less what you buy. Right. Like
Yep.
and I think the community side of things has a much more, regardless of the money involved, the intent, the altruistic nature is, really personal growth and exposure. And it's put on by people. I mean, arguably, we have no business running a conference. Like those big companies, and our shows are, I mean, for some of them, relatively the same size. Obviously, a reInvent's like 35,000
Yeah.
people, which is redonkulous. But
Different category. Yeah.
yeah, but when you think about me, there's 2 people who planned 2 major events that happen in 2 different metros. Just 2 people, not a marketing team and a sales team and hire an event company and all of that. It's just a couple people. So,
Yep.
should there be more? Yes, we should have more people, but we don't. Um, but you just like you said, like there's the community side of things, and then there's this for-profit side. And I look at it as like, are you the product or are you part of the community? And
Yep.
support them.
All that to say, yeah, support them. Buy those early bird tickets. Show up. Yeah, have fun. I think you could look at the attendee base for any of these events, and you're very unlikely to find someone that says, "I really regret my time
Yeah.
going to the events."
Yeah.
And you see a lot of the opposite. Like that conference could be, this was the place where I made the connection with my next employer. I got a job offer. I had a conversation with someone who connected me with someone else. There's so many different facets to these events that you're really insane for not going. And like
Yeah.
the justification for it all is really easy when you look at what you could potentially get out of it in the long run. And I'm a full supporter of all these events, and I wish I could go to all of them myself. Just, time
Yep.
is really against us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you said is true for like Code Camp to, I put us and KCDC and Code Match. We're kind of in the middle of like the Code Camp to for profit just based on our size. But I mean, your investment is time and a little bit of coin.
Yeah.
And I think the more that we as a community invest in ourselves, the more it attracts the things that we want, right? If we all go and hide, like when I started that conference, I had very large, and I'll leave their names out, but media publications, people, whatever, they were just like, do not have a conference in the Midwest. It's a waste of money and time. Those people don't do shit. And
Those people, I've heard that.
yeah,
Yep.
and it was like, one, off because that's me. And two, like I proved them all wrong. Like there are tens of thousands of engineers across like our little 3-state metro, if you will, who do amazing stuff just because it's not San Francisco or the Silicon Slopes or Austin or whatnot. So that doesn't mean that there's not engineers, but I think the more we can support all the community efforts that are there, the better our own opportunity comes. That kind of law of attraction of like things are happening. You kind of get out of your bubble, your echo chamber, you learn a little bit, you see that this stuff is going on. And that just fuels, everything that's around it. So
On that note, Clark, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
thanks for
I
inviting
think
me.
this was a great conversation, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that conference next year. Sadly, I can't make Wisconsin this year because of scheduling on my part,
Yep. That is your
but
fault.
yeah, it is totally my fault.
That's totally your fault.
But I'm
You messed
going
that
to
up.
keep my calendar open for next year.
We're-
Clark, thank you so much again. And everyone else, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you all next time. You've been listening to the Multithreaded Income Podcast. I really hope that this podcast has been useful for you. If it has, please take a moment to leave a review wherever you get your podcast from. And don't forget, the conversation doesn't stop here. Join us on our Discord at mti.to/Discord. I've been your host, Kevin Griffin, and we'll see you next week. Cha-ching!